What we're going to do is we're going to look at geometric sequences. Now, one of the difficulties with this unit is all the different formulas. So with the geometric sequences versus the arithmetic, what we have is a common ratio. So notice that with the formulas, what we see is an R instead of a D. So the beginning looks the same, but the ending, what we notice is that we have an R instead of a D. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using all of these formulas to write our geometric recursive and explicit formulas. So for the geometric, instead of adding and subtracting like arithmetic, what we're doing is we're multiplying or dividing. So in this first case, from 3 to 6, 6 to 12, we see that we're multiplying by 2. So that means that it's now a geometric model. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my geometric recursive, and I have a sub 1 equals, my first term is 3, a sub n equals a sub n minus 1, and then I'm timesing it by 2. Now the geometric explicit form, it's a sub n equals, my first term is 3, my common difference is 2, and then I have the n minus 1. And that right there is my two different formulas. So let's look at the next one. We have our first term, and in this case, what we do is we see it going down, and so I notice that it's dividing by 2. So my geometric recursive, I have a sub 1 equals 48. I have a sub n equals a sub n minus 1. And instead of putting divided by 2, what I'm going to do is I'm going to times it by 1/2. Now my explicit, I have a sub n equals, my first term is 48. My common ratio is 1/2. And then I raise it to the n minus 1. So looking at the last one, we notice that our first term is 2, and what's happening is that it's being multiplied by 3. So geometric recursive, a sub 1 equals 2, a sub n equals a sub n minus 1, and I'm multiplying it by 3. My explicit form, a sub n equals, my first term is 2, my common ratio is 3, and then we raise it to the n minus 1. So that's writing the two different forms. Now what we're going to do is we're going to find the 10th term. Whenever we're trying to find a specific term, we're always using the explicit form. And we're going to need a calculator for these. These numbers are going to get pretty large or pretty small based on whether the ratio is above 1 or below 1. So for the first one, we're finding a sub 10. And the reason why it's a sub 10 is because we're finding the 10th term. Our first term is negative 2. Our common ratio, if we look at it, we see that we're multiplying by 5. So our common ratio is 5. And then we have to the 10 minus 1. Different calculators calculate it different ways. So I'm not going to go over how to plug it into the calculator. But what you should end up with is negative 3,906,250. Whatever calculator you're going to use, you want to make sure that you know how to use it. A lot of students just watch me put this down and they copy it, but without actually using a calculator, what happens is you get to the test and you don't really know how to use it. So make sure you are practicing during this time. With the next one, we're doing the same thing, except what we notice is that we're dividing it by 3. So we have a sub 10 equals, our first term is 162. We're going to multiply it by 1/3, and we're raising it to the 10 minus 1. So there's two different answers you could get. You could get the decimal answer, and that is correct. Some calculators give you the decimal answer, and that would be fine. And some calculators give you the fraction answer. Either one of these is acceptable. For letter C, we're going to do the same thing. We see our first term is 6, and we see what's happening is we're multiplying it by 7. So we have a sub 10 equals 6 times 7, and then what we have is 10 minus 1. So a sub 10 equals, we have 242,121,642. Now, our last example, we're going to take our recursive form and we're going to convert it to the explicit. Now, different books use different forms. So I personally like the A's, but I have the G here just to remind me that there are different forms for these, and just to let you know that to be aware, just because there might be a different letter, it still means the same thing. Some books even use functional form, so it's always good to be familiar with the functional form. Notice that we have the F's instead of A's, and that would be another example of a different type of form. So if you do see a different form, just because it has a different letter doesn't mean it's something different. The key to geometric is that we're multiplying by a common ratio. So whenever we're multiplying by a common ratio, it's going to be a geometric. Now, in this case, our first term is -4, and then our common ratio is 6, and then we're going to raise it to the 12 minus 1. This time it's 12 because it says the 12th term. And our answer is -1,451,188,224. So the next one, a sub 12 equals, first term is 64. Our common ratio is 3/4, and then we're raising it to the 12 minus 1. This one, my calculator did not give me a fraction. It just gave me a decimal. So I just have 0.27030. And then for the last one, I did get a fraction and a decimal. So a sub 12 equals, I have -100. The common ratio is 1/2. I'm raising it to the 12 minus 1. And my answer is a sub 12 equals -0.048828, or the fraction answer is -25 over 512. And that is not a decimal.